Simple Ed, simplify processes, amplify results. Simple Ed.
My name is Yasir. I am the founder and CEO of Simple Ed. And one of the reasons that I created Simple Ed was that I came to United States as an international student myself. But one of the things that I realized as I interacted with more and more universities was that some of them were having a little bit of issue connecting with the Indian audience. And when I say connecting, I'm not talking about a physical connection. I've seen a lot of institutions in my career physically visit India, whether it's in a format or whether they're presenting to a student body. And I can sometimes really in real time see the disconnect with the students and parents that they're engaging with. And don't get me wrong, I think US institutions mean well and the intention definitely is there, but sometimes due to cultural differences, our different perspectives, there is that disconnect. So in today's session, we will try to understand what is that disconnect and how do Indian institutions try to engage universities? Because as you can understand, most of Indian universities admission staff is also from India. So they have studied in India, grown up in India, and they can connect with the local market a little easier than maybe some of our American peers. So with that being said, let's dive in and let's look at this session. And I'll also give you a heads up. I'll keep the information very, very crisp and keep this session very short. But I promise you that by the end of the session, you will have actionable items that you can implement in your communication strategies and marketing strategies. So let's dive in. So quickly, let's look at the agenda. We are going to start with discussing the higher education landscape, looking at the market, and then diving into effective strategies that you can implement. So, of course, let's start with the basics. Try to understand the Indian higher education landscape. And once we understand it better, we will be definitely able to create better marketing and promotional materials, collaterals, along with a better communication plan. So I know as international admission professionals, a lot of us understand how important India is for international enrollment. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand the magnitude of opportunities that India has to offer. So few things that I wanted to draw your attention to, just to put things in perspective, is first point is, I think we are all aware that India has the world's second largest higher education system. But when you compare that to the United States, India barely has about 1,000 universities and United States has more than 3,500. Although the difference in population is huge, still United States has a lot of more institutions than India does. But at the same time, please keep in mind, we're talking about universities. India has close to 35,000 higher education institutions, which are very different than universities. And we can get into definitions in a different session. But for the purposes of this session, we are going to look at universities only. And then you can read all of the other points that are on this slide. But the most important one is the last one, that about 40% of India's population consists of people under the age of 25. So India is a very, very young country. And a lot of students, a lot of people from that 1.2 billion population are of the college age going age. Combine that with the rising middle class, it gives you a great market to recruit from. And it gives you a market that is very enthusiastic and focused on higher education. So if you look at the second last point, you can also look at what kind of programs these students are interested in. And I think there's no surprises that STEM programs are leading, followed by management and business programs. The other thing that I wanted to share with some of you, because you might not be aware of these numbers, but in India, because of the huge volume of students trying to get into master's programs or bachelor's programs as well, Indian institutions, government has to come up with solutions How do we filter applications? It definitely cannot be done on a case-by-case basis because there's just a huge volume of applications. And in order to overcome that, pretty much for every program that you want to pursue, you will have to appear for a competitive exam. And these exams are held nationwide, and millions of students appear for these exams. So just to give you a few examples so you can understand the demand and the supply that exists in India and the huge gap between the demand and supply, it will really open your eyes up to the kind of opportunities that are there in India from an international institution's perspective. So CAT is an exam that Indian students give for business management programs. And for this year, about 2 million candidates appeared for less than 10% of the seats, right? So seat is referred to in India as, the number of available programs or admissions that will be granted. So about 90% of students that prepare for this exam, appear for this exam, pay for this exam, do not get into the institution that they're trying to get into. So where do all of these students go? That is the question. That is the reason that India happens to be one of the largest market for study abroad programs, because Indian students, unfortunately, don't necessarily have a choice. They either get through these stringent courses, programs, and exams to get their desired institution, or else they might be forced to join an institution that does not provide a very well quality education, and they might have to compromise on that. So a lot of students like myself are left with no other options but to look at institutions beyond India, and that's where you come in. The other NEET is an exam that Indians take to get into medical program, and this year about 2.4 million students appeared for that exam, and there were 109,000 seats available. So once again, you can look at the huge disparity in the demand and supply. If you've not heard of IITs, IITs are Indian Institute of Technology, and they are very, very well sought after institutions. And about 1 to 1.2 million students take it every year, and about 7 to 12% have a realistic chance of getting admitted to any of the IITs. They keep increasing the number of IITs pretty frequently, but still they just cannot meet the demand for higher education in India. Now let's look at things from the US perspective. As you can see on the bar that we have in front of us, STEM happens to be a great program, very well sought after. So if your institution has graduate STEM programs, I think India makes complete sense for you. And same thing goes for business and management. And also keep in mind, like, if you have a niche program that you're trying to promote, whether it's fashion, whether it's something in food sciences, there are opportunities for those programs also, but you'll have to be more strategic. You just cannot go anywhere in India. You'll have to look at what market really resonates with that program and focus on them. But generally speaking, I think most of the places that you can go in India, these are the programs that are very popular. And if you look at the Open Doors data, I think you can easily see that about 78% of the students enrolled in United States were studying STEM. So STEM is definitely one of the dominant fields. And also, if you compare undergraduate enrollment with the graduate enrollment, you can see graduate enrollment is definitely a lot bigger chunk than the undergraduate enrollment. Now, I just wanted to share this statement made by Indian Ministry of Human Resources and Development. Ministry of Education comes under HRD, which is Human Resource and Development of India. And the reason I wanted to share this with you, once again, to share with you what is the big gap between the demand and the supply. India can currently barely meet its demand for higher education. The numbers I was trying to find for you, but I wasn't able to find definite numbers. So it's somewhere between 17 to 20%. That's the only percentage of demand that India currently can meet for higher education. So with that being said, these are the exact quotations from the ministry that they are saying that we will need another 800 to 900 universities and 40,000 to 45,000 colleges within the next 10 years to meet this demand. And of course, this is a very unrealistic goal. So when did the government make the statement? They made the statement when they launched NEP, which is the new education policy of India that was launched in 2020. And what NEP does is it opens doors for internationalization for a lot of Indian universities. It promotes India as a destination for foreign institutions to come and open their campuses in order to help more and more universities come and meet the demand for higher education. So Indian government is very supportive of higher education, whether it's Indian students going abroad or foreign institutions coming and partnering with Indian institution or trying to open a campus in India. And Indian government has been very, very supportive of that. And this new education policy is a policy that is a testament to that. So now let's dive into the meat of this session, why you're here, marketing in India. How can you market in India? What are the things that you should keep in mind and what we can learn from Indian institutions that are currently doing effective marketing and communication in India and getting enrollments because of that. So when we look at the marketing and communication strategies, I think before we get into that, we need to really understand the basics, right? So there are a few terms that you will hear from me. And if you do your own research, you will see these terms appear over and over again. If you've been to India, you must be familiar with some of these terms. So one of the terms that I want to introduce you to is pass out. You know, when you talk to an Indian parent, Indian student, you will hear this term a lot. I'm going to pass out in 2023, right? And from an American perspective, it's a little funny because in United States, passing out means to faint or lose consciousness, right? But in India, passing out means the year of graduation. So if I say, hey, I'm going to pass out next year, that means I'm going to be done with my bachelor's in 2025 and I'll be ready for master's. The other disconnect I've seen is when master's programs go to India to try to recruit, they say, hey, we are graduate program. And in India, master's is usually referred to as postgraduate. And sometimes I've seen like students and institutions have this funny conversation where they're asking about masters, but they say, hey, I'm interested in graduate. And the university says, hey, you know, I am actually here only for master's program. So it's a good term to keep in mind. And the reason I'm sharing these jargons with you, because what you want to do is when you're creating presentation materials for India, slides, decks for India, it's best to use the language that they are familiar with. So it eliminates a lot of back and forth and gives the students a lot more clarity, especially the parents who might not be as familiar or not as international as their kids are. The third term that I want to introduce to you is placement. In Indian higher education, this term gets used around a lot because placement means what is the student doing after completion of the program. So you will see Indian institutions talk about 99% placement rate. What that means is what they're claiming is that 99% of their students that finish the program are now employed or enrolled in a terminal degree or whatever the next step in their career is. So this is something that Indian students, parents ask a lot about. And this is something that we would encourage you to be familiar with as you decide to recruit from India. Now, the next thing is understanding the mindset, the Indian mindset. And until unless you're in Harvard or an Ivy League or a highly selective institution, most of you are trying to connect with Indian middle class or higher middle class, upper middle class, right? So it's important to understand their mindset. Why do Indians focus so much on education? India has a culture of really, like every household focuses a lot on education. So when I came to United States as an international student, it was a culture shock for me to hear parents talk about college like it's an option. In India, it's usually not talked about like it's an option. If you can afford it, you are going to college. Like bachelor's is the bare minimum and master's is expected, you know, of every student. If they can do it, it's definitely expected. So when I was doing my OPT, my parents were very disappointed because they thought I'm not gonna pursue masters, which I obviously had plans to after my OPT. But of course, a lot of parents don't really understand immigration, and they were thinking that I'm just going to continue working. Once I start making money, I'm never going to go back to school. So that is pretty much, generally speaking, true for a lot of Indian parents and households, that they see higher education as a brighter future, right? They want their kids to be financially independent. And that is the prime reason they are so much focused on higher education. Everything else, all other benefits of education are definitely important, but they come next. Career prospect is the number one reason they are interested in higher education. Now, if a family is inclined to provide their son, daughter, or anyone in the family a foreign higher education, then they are definitely looking to break through the glass ceiling, and they have even higher expectations of a better paying job, a job that really elevates their social status, something that the parents can brag about. And that is the mindset. That's why rankings happen to be so important, because parents do want that bragging right, that my child goes to this really highly ranked institution. So with that in mind, let's dwell down into other points. Now, before we talk about other things, I want to also focus on understanding the target audience, because our job as marketers, recruiters, someone that's trying to promote our institutions and programs, is to really understand what the student wants and deliver that to them. So 50% of the task for us is to understand what is it that the students want to learn about, right? So here is a survey done by QS, and I think very interesting findings and very consistent with what we hear from students and parents on a daily basis. Is unfortunately, after President Trump's terms, we are seeing a lot of questions about racism. Will I be accepted? Will there be discrimination? So I am not surprised to see that the number one thing that's important to students is if the institution is welcoming for international students. Next is, does the university has high quality teaching standards, right? And the third one is something that is, in my opinion, number one. I'm surprised to see this is number 3 in their surveys, but can I get a work visa after graduating? This is something that students really consider when they are making a decision if to study abroad and where to study abroad. And of course, the cost of studying is always there, and a good employment option clubbed with if they can work after graduation is something that students really focus on when deciding where to study. Now, the next thing that is important to understand is which of the following marketing communication are influential in helping students choose a university, right? So once again, you can see some clear winners here. Information on work placements, which is something that we already spoke about, and which you will see is a consistent pattern when designing marketing for an Indian market, that students, parents, educators are very interested in how can your institution help them secure employment after completion of the program. Ability to meet international alumni. This is something that is becoming more and more prevalent. If you do not have a study ambassador or a program where students can go on your website and connect with alumni, that is something that is very, very powerful for a market like India, right? And all the other items are equally important, but I would really focus on the first two, as they are something that we don't see enough of from the institutions. So that is something to keep in mind as we move forward. Now, very interesting question is, who are we designing this marketing and communication plan for? Is it the students? Is it the parents? Is it the educators of India? Who is it that we're deciding this for? So I think for that purposes, it's important to understand who the real decision makers are, right? So here, once again, you will see a clear winner. 70% are parents, who are the biggest influencers when in students' decision-making process. So when you are creating a marketing and communication material, or when you're creating a strategy, do you have a strategy directed at parent? If you're creating a handout for a student, do we have a handout for student? If you're doing a webinar for students, are we doing a webinar directed at parents? So those are things that we really need to talk about. And as you move forward into this discussion, you will see the topic of student ambassadors or alumni, whatever you want to call them, will be a recurring theme, because students now, with the help of technology, want to connect with students from their country who has already completed their program from your institution. And that becomes a big factor in influencing the parents and the students as well. Now let's look at how often do students expect you to contact them, right? And we have divided this by the stages. And hopefully this will provide you some insight from the student's perspective, because I know when we are trying to create our outreach program, communication plans, marketing plans, we sometimes feel like we're in the dark. Maybe are we being too pushy? Are we being, too aggressive? So those are questions that really come to mind while designing these type of communication and marketing strategies. But here you can see, hopefully it helps you a little bit, that weekly is something that's expected at all the stages, right? And if you're not doing that, then maybe that is something to consider, that how you can contact every student that has made an inquiry. And if, of course, after they've applied, the level of service and the level of communication definitely needs to be more enhanced in my communication. Otherwise, that application might not convert into an enrollment. So this is the timing, and I think that is equally important in designing your marketing and communication plans. Now, as we have talked about understanding the target audience, the next thing that comes to mind is what communication channels that we should be using. And these days, I think everyone is on social media. Social media is a great way to communicate and share anything that you have to share about. And while talking to my colleagues and peers in United States, I often hear that Facebook is dead. But as you can see, in India, that's not the fact. Facebook is the leading social media platform in India, followed by WhatsApp. And I know a lot of US universities are still not integrating WhatsApp into their communication plan. Please believe me, you can create a lot of amazing collaterals, a lot of amazing videos. But if you're sharing them on email and not on WhatsApp, you're doing a disservice to yourself, because we have done testing, we've done some surveys, and the results are just mind-blowing. If you send a piece of information to student over WhatsApp, the interaction level, engagement level is much, much higher than if you email it to them, specifically in India. So please keep in mind like that. Those are the top two platforms to integrate into your marketing and communication plan. Now let's look at the effective strategies for student recruitment and outreach from the perspective of an Indian universities and colleges, and what we can learn from them. So here we have taken a screenshot of an ad and shared that with you. So I think most of you would agree that in regions like India, China, rankings still matter. And as you can see, this is Parul University. They are talking about ranking. This ad, the only thing this talks about is ranking, right? So one of their pharmacy programs is really highly ranked. They're ranked in innovation, and so on and so forth. An NAAC grade, this is an Indian body, a government body that gives grading to universities to help students understand the quality of the education that institution provides. So as you can see, that's on the top, and over here on the building itself, you see the accreditation or the ranking by NAAC. I am yet to see any American university type their name on the top and then say we are accredited by this institution, right? So I think if you are a business program, STEM program, whatever programs you are, accreditation does matter in India, and rankings do matter in India. So that is something to keep in mind. how you're gonna share that, where you're gonna share that, that is another conversation, but it definitely must be shared at some point with the students, and it really does add to your credibility. Now, the next ad that I want you to look at is by Amity University, and they're promoting their MBA program. So one of the patterns that you will see is the word placement that's being used again, right? So not only they're saying that if you come study with us, you will be placed in a company. They're also sharing the salary, the highest salary their students, could get. And they're making this information public because they understand that this is what this is what students and parents want to know. And I know sometimes you might not have that information, or your university might not be comfortable sharing that information publicly. But what I do is I share a lot of data that is put out by Department of Labor, right? So when I'm talking to students that are thinking about STEM programs and they're looking at many different institutions, many different countries to go to, I often share with them that this is the amount that an individual who's done the bachelor's in STEM typically makes. Because that data is eye-opening for a lot of Indian students and parents, because the salaries are very different in many different countries, and it's important for them to understand before they make an informed decision that what will be the earning potential after completion of the program. And as you can see, not only that, they're putting the logos and names of the companies where their students are working. Once again, very focused on the job prospects after the student completes their program. And I think I don't need to tell you, you're probably tired of answering emails and communications about scholarships. So scholarships always is a very, very popular and favorite topic for students. So if you are offering scholarships, or if you're offering any kind of opportunities that can help them reduce the cost, that is something that definitely should be on the top of the agenda when talking to students and parents. Now let's look at the web screenshot of an Indian university. And one of the things that I want to talk to you about is infrastructure, right? So if you go to Google and you just try to look at many random ads of Indian universities in newspaper, on YouTube, and so on and so forth, one of the patterns that you will realize is they talk a lot about infrastructure. And I have had the privilege of visiting so many US institutions physically, get a campus tour, go to offices, and I'm always blown away with the infrastructure. Gyms, counseling center, world-class classrooms, and you'll be surprised and also amused to learn that a lot of Indian universities also talk about air-conditioned classrooms, free Wi-Fi on campus, laptops for rent, or in the libraries. But I've never ever seen US institutions or international institutions focusing on infrastructure. Because please keep in mind that for a parent that is sitting in India and has never been to United States, they just cannot imagine the wealth of resources that a typical US higher education institution has. And so I encourage you to share it, at least have 1 or 2 slides if it's a presentation. If it's a communication, a drip campaign, have 1 or 2 emails focused on infrastructure. Talk about the rec center, talk about the gym, talk about all the great resources you have on campus, health center, counseling, career center, swimming pool, anything that you want to talk about, quads, because it's not a given and students don't necessarily understand the kind of infrastructure. Library in United States is not just a building full of books. There's so many other resources, and most students don't understand that. If you go and Google library of an Indian college, it will be very, very different. So my advice is, please don't take those things for granted and try to think from an Indian perspective and talk about the amazing buildings, campus, offices, classrooms, projectors, anything that you have that you believe students will value, the parents will value. So now let's talk about digital marketing and online presence. Indian universities are really acing this. They're doing an amazing job of really focusing on digital marketing and online presence. And as someone who is not physically in India, I would encourage you all to have a very strong online presence, whether through social media or through other platforms such as the one that we're going to talk about. IIT Bombay launched a brand new initiative called Stay Connected, and it's an online portal where alumni members can connect, can update, and the prospective students can connect with them. So this is just one very small example, but there are multiple things that could be done to give prospective students access to your current students, professors, alumni, and other resources that can be a cheerleader in your recruitment efforts. This is an example of Google AdWords. As you can see, if you're typing about certain programs on Google, the top ads that are coming up are by universities. So Google AdWords is used a lot in United States as well. And the great thing about it is it's very targeted. So you can just target Mumbai, Delhi, all of India. That's completely up to you. You can really target a few keywords. This is something that Indian universities are doing, and this is something that US institutions, unfortunately, are not doing. This is not that expensive and easy to implement. So I would really encourage you to note down Google AdWords and talk to your tech team and see if they can help you set this up. The ROI on this will be amazing. So another thing that India is known for is word of mouth, right? You must already experience this. A lot of your most amazing students, most loyal students come from word of mouth. And in today's day and age, word of mouth has shifted a little bit. So when I came to United States and I was applying to institutions, I had to go to what we call a cyber cafe, which is a store where you go, pay them a certain amount of money to use the computer, to use the high-speed internet. I did have a computer at home, but I had one of those dial-ups. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it would not work, and it was just a pain to use. So I would just go to a cyber cafe and use that to fill out my applications, email back and forth. And those were different times, right? In today's day and age, students have all the information on the palm of their hands through their cell phones. Everyone has a laptop, and people are very tech savvy these days. So the word of mouth is not technically word of mouth anymore. If I am writing something on my Facebook or my Instagram or making a TikTok video, that still is word of mouth. And I'm not talking about influencers. I'm talking about people with close network, right? Only my friends, family, colleagues are on my social media. So they will really look at that as word of mouth. So if you do not have a referral program, that it is a good time to think about that, because most people would like to talk about your institution if they had a great experience. But if that can be incentivized in certain way, it would just help them take time out and dedicate to talking about your specific institution. If you cannot monetize that, or really get into that official referral program space, then maybe you can just unofficially talk to your students from India, see if they're willing to make a couple of content, whatever they're comfortable with on their social media, if they're able to connect you with their students back home for some kind of virtual engagements, because the word of mouth goes really, really long way. And here we are sharing an organization that is called EduQ. Q means why, and edu, of course, means education. And this helps universities, collaborate, and we are in no way connected with this platform. We're just showing you an example that what they're saying is, if you connect universities with the prospective student, this is the amount you can earn. They have a whole table where they have given, how much a student can earn if they connect them to other students. So that's a very interesting platform, and we just decided to share it with you so you can know what's going on in India. So lastly, one of the things that students really, really want to do is come and visit you, right? In United States, it's very popular to come and register for a campus tour, come to the Welcome Center, and all of those amazing things. Unfortunately, Indian students do not have the opportunity to do that because they'll have to fly to United States. So giving campus tours, virtual campus tours, holding virtual open days is very, very popular, and it allows students to just casually drop by virtually, chat with you, look at your campus, and interact with you. So even if they weren't that interested, they might become more and more interested if they can see your campus, interact with a couple of people already enrolled on your campus. So if you've not done this before, this is something that's a great and easy to implement strategies. You can share your virtual open days with all your agency partners, institution partners, service providers. You can request your current Indian students to post on their social media. So hopefully you get a good crowd and you can address a lot of them together. Here you can see an examples of virtual tools and webinars that Indian universities are using to attract potential students. And this is something that I've seen US institutions do as well. Some of them do it really, really well, but still I think it's a great and almost free way to engage students. So we really wanted to share that with you. So I think that brings us to the conclusion of this session. Very quickly, I want to share with everyone that we're doing 2 graduate programs in the month of October. And they'll be focused on business graduate and STEM graduate. Both of them are 10-day programs, and they will go to 5 different cities in India. Every day we will visit 2 to 3 institutions where we will do workshops on higher education in United States, and students will have the opportunity to hear you speak for 3 to 5 minutes, see a presentation from you, and then we will break down into a fair setting where you can interact with the students. We're also doing a lot of networking events in the evening where you can meet other higher education institutions. And also there are some off-campus events with Education USA, high school counselors, and other higher education institutions, agency partners, etc. But the heart and the soul of all of our tours are always outbound approach, where we are going to institutions and interacting with students and parents on campus. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening to me. I really enjoyed sharing some of these tips and golden nuggets with you. Hopefully you learned something today. And if you have any questions, this is a great time to type them up in the chat box, and I'll be happy to answer them. And if you don't have any questions, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we were able to provide some value to you in this session. Thank you so much. I am going to drop my email in the chat box. So in case someone thinks of a question later on, you can always reach out to me. So thank you. Have a wonderful week ahead. And I'm not seeing a lot of questions coming in. So, all right, I'll conclude the session. Thank you so much.
Simple Ed, simplify processes, amplify results. Simple